Board of Education to order. The meeting has been properly noticed. This time I'd ask Janet to take roll call.
Chris Freeman,
Here.
Mark Hillman,
Here.
Tanya Huseby,
Here.
Clint Moses,
Here.
Carl Palmer,
Here.
Amy Riddle Johnson,
Here.
Charlie Schneider, Angie Skilling,
Here.
David Stone,
Here.
and then we've got our student reps, Logan, and Grace.
Thank you, Janet. We have a quorum to conduct business. At this time, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Our next item on the agenda is item D, agenda order approval revision. Anything for tonight? Tanya?
If you want to just table the one that I suggested for the policy review, just I didn't realize how dense our agenda was, so we can put it off for next meeting. I'm totally fine with it.
Okay, we'll table the item 5F, policy review, till next meeting. Anything else? Okay. We are honored to have two new student reps with us this year, Logan McCoy and Grace Hvac. So at this time, we ask you folks to come forward. You can have a seat at the table and give our student communications.
So I had an opportunity to have lunch today with Logan and Grace, and we've always had really good luck with our student representatives. Just terrific young adults who really care a lot about our schools and our community. And I was very impressed with what I heard from Logan and Grace today. So this will be their inaugural report representing the student council, and I've asked them to introduce themselves and then move forward with their report. So Grace, it looks like you're ready.
Yes, my name is Grace Hvac and I am the student body president at Menomonie High School. I participate in many activities including volleyball, science olympiad, National Honor Society, and student council. This is my senior year and Logan is my vice president.
Hi, I'm Logan. I'm the vice president. I'm also a senior at Menomonie. I run cross country and track, and I like doing science olympiad and forensics, and especially student council.
This school year, this is our third week of school and it's going pretty good. We're really happy to be back in person and having masks optional. Sometimes that can be a little bit of a issue in gym class, but we're doing good and we like the new schedule with the 8 period classes. It's a little bit shorter than the block schedule and we're keeping up with our classes well.
As far as masks go, I'd say about 5% of the students are wearing them right now. So just as estimation for the school board. So our first announcement is that Menomonie Volleyball will be hosting a dig paint night on their home game on September 23rd to raise money for a player whose mom is currently battling cancer.
And that'll be open to the public. We want to get as many people as we can to come because we're raising money for that family, as Logan said. And it would be great to see our fan session be up and running. Next thing on our list, homecoming. This year's theme is Find Your Rhythm, and we picked that kind of as a whole year theme too, as we're kind of moving back into normal themes. And it's essentially music themed, so that's what the rest of the dress-up days will be themed, and etc.
So the activities will be back to normal this year because last year we didn't really have much of a homecoming. So These will include wall decorations, and then we're going to do video skits this year so that administration can look at those before they're put out to the school, and then it'll also be easier as we're just doing the juniors and seniors at the assemblies, so it'll be easier to show them in classes. And then we're also doing a game assembly for just the juniors and seniors, and then as well as a coordination assembly in the same manner with just the 2 classes.
Our dress-up days, as I mentioned before, are music themed, are rock, country, class color, throwbacks, and school spirit, so that'll be a fun way our students can get excited for homecoming.
And then the last thing that we do during the week before the football game is the parade, which will take place on the 1st of October after school at 4 like usual, and then everyone here in the community is welcome to attend that and see the cool floats and fire trucks and stuff that are always there.
Is there any questions or comments that we can answer at this time?
Any questions? Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you for letting us speak.
We appreciate you filming us and look forward to hearing from you guys for the remainder of the school year, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to community communications. We have several tonight. We also have some that have come in via email that I believe we'll have time to read tonight, so we'll read those as well. The comments of the people in the school district of the Menomonie area are encouraged and appreciated by the board and administrators. Education is a partnership with the schools, parents, and taxpayers, all being important participants. This is the time to air concerns, express your opinion on issues. There should be no negative personal attacks against any individuals, including staff, board members, or administrators. Please indicate if you'd like the board president to direct a member of the administration to respond to your concerns. I think, Janet, we'll start with written communications that you oversee. Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for allowing me to give public comment. I want to again bring before you 2 word pictures as we lovingly correct peoples involved in any one of the sexual deviance or transgressions. We truly want to love these students and their peers. Out of great love for the human creature, and as an upright educational institution, we do not want to put swimming trunks into their backpacks. We do want to knock on their door when it is 2 a.m. and fire is pouring from the 2nd-story window. At previous meetings, I gave 3 points of action directed to the board regarding what Dr. Zajdalski and Tonya Kowalski could do to address this issue. I will remind you of these 3 points. Number 1, completely discard or greatly tweak the gender support plan. Replace it with a new plan to truly show compassion to gender-confused students. This will involve redefining words like discrimination, harassment, as well as who is being protected and who is not. For example, we should not protect perverted sexual identities, but we should protect unchangeable characteristics like sex or change. Dr. Zajdalski shows no interest in addressing the plan as yet. Number 2, students must use the bathroom and locker rooms of their biological birth. Wandering into the wrong facility should invoke discipline and counsel, using clergy if necessary. Number 3, instruct Dr. Zajdalski to hire teachers and staff of character. Teachers and staff need to be properly vetted to be people of high moral standards and character who know how to kindly and courageously stand up and speak out against wrong. They should also know how to defend the speech and rights of students who desire to help their peers avoid the pitfalls of any immoral lifestyle. So I respectfully and pointedly am asking the school board members what the Menomonie community can do to see these actions taken in our precious Menomonie schools. Respectfully, Mrs. Josie Pillman. And Amanda Kirby writes, my comment for tonight's board meeting. Children need to be in class. That is where they do their best learning. If they are not sick, they are in school. As for masks, there is no scientific studies proven that they lower COVID spread. No mask, schools open. And if you are worried about being sick, there is online class options. Thank you. And this is from Julie Bendel for the school board. I would ask that the following language remain in the Sdma COVID-19 plan. The individual has been notified of potential COVID-19 exposure, close contact, etc., and has not been released from quarantine as determined by their local county health department. Note, asymptomatic individuals are not required to quarantine if fully vaccinated. If there is a concern about the number of exclusions, I would encourage revisiting the idea of requiring masks and encouraging vaccinations. Thank you, Julie. And this is from Tiffany Alpert. Hello, I'd like to voice my opposition to any changes in the Sdma COVID plan to allow abbreviated quarantine for students in the Sdma. Our COVID cases and exclusion numbers are way up because we do not have any large-scale mitigation measures in place. If the district is truly interested in lowering the number of students being excluded due to being close contacts, a change to the masking and distancing policy is the appropriate avenue of discussion. All students will be able to continue to participate in face-to-face learning with masking and distancing mitigation measures. We know that when we collectively employ these mitigation measures, exclusions go down. Surplus exclusions are the direct result of poor leadership and mitigation risk. The decisions made before the start of the school year are proving to be disastrous for our students and schools. The additional safety measures of masks and social distancing will help students, families, teachers, and the district get back on the right track for full classrooms with continued in-person instruction. And our last one here is from Rachel Henderson. Hello, I am unable to attend tonight's school board meeting. I hope my comments can be read into record. I'm extremely concerned by the proposed changes to Sdma's COVID policy. As I read it, it seems that you propose to remove quarantine requirements for students and staff who are close contacts of confirmed cases. I question the legality of this move, but moreover, it is a terrible choice for public health at this moment. As a mother, I am terrified and can't imagine sending my 2 young children to school knowing that it is extremely likely that they'll be in close, unventilated quarters with unmasked, contagious classmates and maybe even teachers. This seems like a guarantee that the entire student body is exposed within a month or 2. I assume, since there is no clear information to help me understand otherwise, that this is in response to the disruptions in learning that come from so many exclusions. I am sympathetic to how difficult it is to deal with, but there are clear public health guidelines that would help, namely universal masking. This choice would be unconscionable. It will result in sick children. I urge you not to make this policy change. Thank you, Rachel Henderson.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Now we'll do the in-person community communications. I ask that when I read your name, I'll take them in order that I receive them. So I ask that when I read your name, come forward, state your name, your township, or you don't have to give your exact address, but if you're from Menomonie or whatever, state that. And then you'll have 3 minutes. Tanya will be keeping track of time, and we'll stick to the 3-minute guidelines. So, the very first speaker today is Damon Wilkinson. Something like that.
Check, 1, 2. My name is Damon Wilkinson. I have 2 children in the district, 4th grade and 6th grade. I directed to the bottom half of page 4 of the Sdma COVID plan for 2021-2022 under guiding principles point 2. The health, safety, and overall well-being of Sdma students and staff is the district's top priority. Last night, the nurse called my house and informed us that my child was exposed to contact testing and had to quarantine for 14 days. It doesn't matter that my child was worn a mask the entire time. She's been distanced since kindergarten, and the entire time she's missed less than 10 days of school. While talking with the nurse, we asked how many families were affected. She had to call over 40 other families because of this one close contact tracing. One of these arguments against masking has been my child, not a decision. But that's not true. We live in society. As part of society, and by extension to school, we interact with others. Now, due to some other families' actions, intentional or not, my child has to suffer and miss more school than she has missed the previous 6 years combined. Approximately 40 other families are impacted. There's 40 people saying to themselves, is my kid sick? How do I get my kids home? What do I do for childcare? On page 4 of the plan, number 1, in-person curricular, extracurricular, and co-curricular experiences are vitally important to the immediate and future well-being of students. Not providing educational opportunities for students can be detrimental to the immediate and long-term well-being of students. The district had in place a mandatory mask policy. There will still be quarantine, but the time window will be much shorter than the current 14 days. I understand some members of the board feel that having the quarantine is burdensome. There are solutions to abolish it, not manage the time earthquake. They just pretend it didn't happen. In fact, that's agenda item number 4, section 8 for discussion later this week. This is against the recommendations of the superintendent and all medical professionals. I have no idea the legal implications of the decision. I suspect the county has done any quarantine the entire classes. That's not the point. I don't understand how we can make the argument that in quarantine makes any sense. We are stated on page 4, number 2, the health, safety, and overall well-being of students and staff is the district's top priority. To be clear, having the school district stop quarantining students does nothing to stop spread of COVID. All that will happen is the board and district lose autonomy over the process. Worst case, the county will be forced to come in and shut down entire classes or grades based upon the county, state, and federal guidelines. There were only 4 children out of 15 in my child's care class this morning. But the mask mandate would either keep those kids in class or at least get them back faster than 14 days. With no mask mandate, no quarantine, that class is likely to have 0 students because the county health department will quarantine everyone. I urge the board to implement a mandatory masking policy. I beg the board to keep the current quarantine guidelines in place. The health, safety, and overall well-being of Sdma students and staff is the district's top priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Abraham Smith. On deck, Lenny Marshall.
Thank you. Abraham Smith, town of Menomonie, County. I just had a couple questions for Joe Zadowski. I haven't quite heard it, and I will direct questions to the superintendent.
What I said is indicate if you'd like the board president to direct a member of the administration to
May I
respond
direct
to
a question to the board president?
He may not answer it now, but you
Certainly.
certainly.
I'm curious, I've seen the spreadsheet dashboard that was put up last Wednesday. That said that, from memory, approximately 135 students excluded so far, from memory. I'm curious, since it's not Wednesday yet, what that number is as of today, plus or minus. And I recall that in previous meetings earlier in July and August, the superintendent had sort of a rough gut estimate, and to be fair, it was an estimate of roughly 1,500 student days to be expected excluded. My guess, based on that spreadsheet, we're actually already at or past that number. So I'm curious how that estimate has been revised in terms of the current growth rate we're seeing. We just heard about another 40 or something students being excluded. So that times roughly 10 days per student. That's already another 400 days, for example, right? So I think we're seeing very rapid increase of exclusions. That's very concerning because, students are excluded not just because, we don't want to see them, right? We want to see students in classes. We want to work with students. Students are excluded because there is a risk to them and their families that is not detectable for several days. And we know that, diseases have an incubation period. There's a risk of exposure. The exact exposure time may not be quite known. So we want to be as careful as possible. So with that context, I just really hope the board will consider, making sure that that quarantine periods are kept in line with official recommendations, and doing what we can to maximize distancing. And even if masking is optional, implementing plans to inform teachers, parents, students, bus drivers about the importance and take on the public educational role of hosting vaccination clinics, distributing masks, helping parents find masks that fit their students, and so on. So I think they have a good educational role to play, even in a mask optional policy, to make the whole community as safe as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Laney? On deck, Craig Olson.
Wow.
On deck, on deck.
Hey, Dave.
I missed the on deck part.
Dave, just a point of order. Was Joe going to respond to those questions now?
I
There were
think
two
you'll
easy
probably address most of it in the COVID report, Joe.
Okay.
If that's all right. Laney?
Hi, my name is Marshall, Sdma. So, I don't usually say this in public, but I'm saying it to you because you need to know how much is invisible to your understanding of the people who are in these schools, or at least it seems like you're acting in a way that makes it seem like they're invisible. I'm immunocompromised, and I work at UW Scout, where there is a mask mandate. And I'm so grateful for that, because if I worked in the Menomonie public schools, I would need to quit my job. I would not feel safe walking into that classroom. As you've heard from other speakers tonight, your job is to prioritize the health of everybody who comes to the schools. And also keep people able to be in the schools. The students who are medically fragile, the students who can't learn at home as well as they can in person. This is your responsibility. So I ask that you listen to all of the health experts and all of the specialists in UW Scout and follow the recommendations so that people like me can keep their jobs and kids like mine can get the great educations that the Menomonie public schools gave them. It's really important that you understand that there's a lot of concerns and a lot of fragility that you don't see because we don't all choose to stand up and holler about it every day. But it's there. If you choose to reduce the length of the time that people are out of school, that's exposing more people to more risk. I really hope that as a school board, you fulfill your responsibility of keeping as many students and teachers and staff and administrators as safe as possible. Minnesota, Joe and I have had our differences over the years, but I'll tell you, I'm not quite sure why you're not listening to him on this one. Please, be responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Laney. Craig Olson. On deck will be Tom Pearson.
Hey everybody, Craig Olson. I live in Menomonie, 737 River Heights Road, just around the corner. I think most of you know who I am. Been teaching here for 25 years now. I got a lot of your kids in class and have had them, and it's just what an awesome school district we got here. It's just a great. I love teaching here. I want to try to maybe convince you guys that we maybe need to mask up these elementary kids. Look, we need power, sewer and water, police, fire in our schools to function. Our communities don't work. That's why this is a government and not a private entity. We cannot shut down the assembly line. The government cannot shut down the assembly line. Ronald Reagan once famously said. Imagine the agonizing decision of a parent of a 6-year-old who's excluded, not because they have COVID, but because they were sitting next to their own kid. And now that single father maybe has to decide whether or not he's going to leave his 6-year-old at home or go to work. That's a tough decision. Now, not all of us we're not all from here. We don't have established families where grandma can kind of swoop in and take the kid. That's a tough call. Do I go to work and pay the mortgage, or do I leave my kid at home alone? High school, people have chosen vaccine, no vaccine. That's maybe a different animal. Maybe you want to have a slightly different rule for the high school kids, but the elementary kids haven't had that choice. They are vulnerable. And if they are not in school and they're home alone, or if their parents can't go to work, our town could really suffer. Longer lines, employers who can't have their workers come in. So I'd really like you to reconsider, especially at that elementary level, getting those kids masks on, getting them 3 feet apart so we can minimize those elementary exclusions. Maybe do this through 6th or 7th grade. I think those kids can handle it. We got great staff, you got awesome kids, great families here. We can probably make that work and minimize our exclusions. And I'm going to thank you for your time and wish you all luck with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Tom Pearson. On debt, Monica Barrier.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Pearson. I live in the city of Menomonie, and I have 3 children in the school district. I appreciate the opportunity to be here again, and I just wanted to take some time to remind the board of their obligation to ensure a safe and accessible learning environment for all of our students. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, students with IEPs are entitled to a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. Students with disabilities are also entitled to reasonable accommodations under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Because the board declined to follow the unanimous recommendations of its own health advisors and district leadership to require universal masking in school, my daughter, who has Down syndrome and is too young to be vaccinated, is unable to attend school in person. My wife has taken an unpaid leave of absence to be home with her, and she is missing out on crucial educational opportunities. So you, the board, are violating her rights, as well as the right of other students with medical vulnerabilities to full participation in educational programs. You're probably aware the U.S. Department of Education has opened civil rights investigations in 5 states that have attempted to prohibit indoor masking at schools because such policies discriminate against students with disabilities. On September 1st, the Wisconsin DPI sent a letter to district administrators cautioning them that universal mask policy may be necessary to protect the rights of students with disabilities. So I understand that student exclusions are rapidly increasing because of COVID-19 exposure, and that one board member, or maybe multiple, have proposed the elimination of quarantine requirements as a way to address this crisis. The solution, of course, is to simply follow the recommendations of public health officials, district medical advisors, district leadership, and I would guess the district legal counsel as well. To ignore these recommendations and instead eliminate quarantine requirements would amount to intentional negligence and a willful disregard for student health and safety. It suggests a disingenuous effort to hollow out the district's COVID-19 mitigation efforts. It's unethical and legally reckless. If you eliminate quarantine requirements, you are choosing to further erode the safety of all students trying to attend school, and you are further discriminating against students with disabilities and medical vulnerabilities, such as my daughter. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica Barrier. Lynn Hausman is on deck.
Sorry, that's it. No. This one. All right.
You can take it off there.
You can take the mic off if you prefer.
Okay, sorry, I just not into talking down at people. So I think I can speak for everyone here when I say that this is exhausting, right? And I'd really like to see the board come up with a more durable solution, right? That maybe is in the spirit of compromise a little bit, so that we don't end up right back here again, in 2 weeks. As I look at the agenda, I see that there's a couple of motions on the table, and both of them, I think, no matter which way we go, half this auditorium is going to walk out angry. You all are going to get a bunch of letters, right? And we're going to be here next week. And that's not a good solution, not a good outcome for anybody here. I was encouraged, so alarmed to see the suggestion, right, that quarantine go away. You saw the mask, I'm not into that. However, I did see the suggestion of maybe an abbreviated quarantine, right, where people could test out of quarantine and maybe sign an affidavit to wear a mask. If you guys don't go full masking, fine, but can you at least ask the students who've been close contacts to wear masks? Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Hausman. Lynn is the last one I had, unless anybody else had one that wanted to speak.
Lynn Halson, live in the city of Menomonie. I am glad that my 10-year-old niece does not go to school in Menomonie. She goes to school in Northfield, Minnesota, and masks are required. I think the science is clear, and any resistance to masks is political, and it should have no place in a public school. Those of us who are wearing masks tonight are protecting you who are not. I don't like to see the numbers go up, and they're going up. We're going to have more and more students missing school. What is the cutoff going to be? When is enough enough? Good public health policy is very clear. It's science-based. The numbers are why the recommendations say that students should be wearing masks. I was a teacher, and I'm just wondering what kind of support the teacher would have if the teacher said, I'm going to require masks in my classroom. Does the teacher in Menomonie have that right? No. And if the teacher does that, will the teacher receive support? Please consider the public health policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. We have one more. Jen Flanders.
I'm Jen Flanders. I've been here before. I guess I'm too short. I'm here on behalf of my nieces and nephews that live in the district. I do not. It's rather scary to hear all of the so-called science experts come and tell you that your mask will save you. I don't know where they get their science from, but it's not planet Earth, I guess. I don't know. That's a joke. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Masks don't protect us from viruses. We've had viruses in the world since the beginning. And we've never used masks before, and we certainly don't quarantine people that aren't sick. Might quarantine people that are sick, but not that aren't sick. Masks the tests only prove that you've been in contact with a virus at some point in your life. Not even necessarily a coronavirus, and that's only if you run your test for so many times that it picks up all the dead stuff that you've been carrying around, that your kidneys have and your liver have not discarded. Like I said, coronaviruses have been around for years. We come in contact with them all the time. They're called the cold and the flu. Amazingly, the cold and the flu have disappeared in the last year. The tests are also not accurate. The jab is killing people so much that the VAERS reports are being scrubbed, and children don't even hardly get sick with this, and there is no proof that they pass it on to adults. This is nothing but fear-mongering and propaganda, no bit different than the Nazis used. And so anyone who promotes this said virus, quarantine, forced testing, forced, I forgot to put my glasses on, no wonder I'm having a hard time seeing, sorry. Forced testing,
forced suffocating of our children or ourselves, forced vaccinating, should all be tried against as or with crimes against humanity. If you really want to know how to protect yourself, follow the experts such as...
Okay, thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for being, audience, for being respectful. You can stop. Sorry. So, thank you for that. That concludes our communications for tonight. At this time, I'd like to call on Leah for revenue and expense reports for the month ending June 2021 and August 2021. Leah?
Okay, we'll take a look at the June expenditure and revenue reports first. And the reason we don't do the June reports in July is because they're still under audit review and it takes a while to prepare them. So that's why we're having 2 months worth of expense and revenue reports tonight. So if you want to open up, the first one would be the June revenues. So the total revenues for our Fund 10 operational fund is $40,964,902.91, which is right on track, as you can see with the budget. For Fund 21, that's our gift donation fund. Those donations are much higher this year. It's $672,332.68. And that is, it's so high this year because we closed our Fund 60 activity fund and moved that into Fund 21. So that's why the large increase in there this year. And then Fund 27 is our special education fund. And that total revenues for the year was $6,420,885.95. Then moving on to the expense reports, we'll take a look at the expenses by function first. If we take a look at the percent year-to-date spent, we're at 95.61% spent compared to last year at 91.90%. And at the bottom, the current month notes, we have listed the COVID-19 shutdown was an impact this year. And then also, we had higher than usual health insurance claims. And we also had the weight room remodel. So you'll see in several of the line items, we went over budget. The first one was co-curricular, and that was due to the weight room equipment that we purchased. And then business administration, those costs were higher as well. That's a combination of the weight room remodel and also increase in health insurance claims. And then on the bottom line item, the other non-program transactions, we had Medicare, Medicaid claims, cost adjustments, and that caused that to increase. And then we also had to increase our health insurance. It's called IBNR. It's incurred but not reported. It's claims that maybe happened in June, but we don't know what those will be for maybe 60, 90 days after the month ending June. So we have to put enough money into our health insurance reserves to make sure we can cover those claims. So that line item has those items in there. The next report is the expenditures by object, and this is all funds. This year, we ended the year at 96.10% compared to 92.10% last year. And then the current month notes are listed at the bottom of the report. Does anyone have any questions for the June expenses or revenues? Okay, then moving on to August. For revenues, we brought in $53,356.87 for the general fund. Majority of that was due to just local funds being received in, but then we also had some Medicare cost adjustments, revenues also that were recorded. For Fund 21, we received $13,003.12, and then for Special Education Fund 27, again, that was Medicare revenue received, that was $25,905.77. Moving on to the August expenses by function. Again, this is the General Operations Fund 10. Year-to-date, we're at 6.43% compared to 5.44%. For Special Education, we're at 1.57 compared to 1.35. And then food service, we're at 4.61 compared to 8.62%. And then current month notes are noted down below. There's always timing of bills and purchases, and then Medicaid cost adjustments. This year, we don't typically see those this early in the year. They usually come at the end of the year, so that's a difference for this month compared to prior years. And then also summer school. It's important to note that last summer we didn't have summer school like we're running this year, so costs are running higher because of that. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions from Okay, thank you, Leah. Do you want to do the expenses by object or not?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that one. Yes, the breakdown by objects, and again, that's all funds. We're at 6.9% compared to 4.52. And again, I listed all those current month notes down below, and then just in addition to it was the decrease in debt service payment for September, August, September, and then also summer school, some summer school costs are included in there as well.
Thank you, Leah.
Yep.
We'll move on to our monthly employment report. Any questions on that? Start of a new year, so we have a lot of new employees. Okay. No questions. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to?
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. Just really quick, with the clerical positions, there's one at several of the schools each. Were those retirements or additional staff? Can you remind me? Somebody?
Most of these were changes of position in terms of people changing positions or taking different opportunities.
Any other questions on the monthly employment report? Okay, move on to consent agenda, item 2A. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Clint, second?
Second.
Carl? We have a motion and a second. Consent agenda contains minutes from our regular board meeting from August 9th, our special board meeting on August 23rd, our annual meeting on August 23rd, and our special board meeting from August 25th. It also contains our financial reports, the board approved general fund checks in the amount of $1,628,865.26, and cash receipts in the amount of $90,008.38 for the month of August 2021 as presented. We had no donations exceeding $1,000. This also includes the Special Education Cooperative Agreement between the Sdma and the Eau Claire Area School District as presented. If you want to touch on that, Joe, the routine agreement.
Yeah, it's just a routine agreement for providing services that we might not have. We might not have the need for a full person for those services in our district, so we share services with other districts sometimes.
Do we have a motion and a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, Janet? Mark, are you able to vote electronically or will you need to vote by voice? Okay, go ahead, Mark. Did you have everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
Mark votes yes. Okay, motion passes by unanimous vote, 8-0. Moving on to item 3A, personnel consent agenda. Action to approve personnel actions. Is there a motion to approve? Chris, is there a second? Angie beat you to it. Second by Angie. We just have one on here. Any discussion? Okay. Janet, let's vote. Chris made the motion. Angie second. Mark, you might try to refresh. Maybe you can get it to come through. I'm not sure.
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
Okay, we got it.
It came through, Mark. So. The vote was unanimous, 8-0, to approve the personnel consent agenda. Action item 4A, action to approve updates to the Sdma COVID-19 plan. Motion to approve. Motion to approve. Okay, we'll have discussion. Go ahead, Joe.
So it is recommended that the board take a look at the abbreviated quarantine protocols. As the board knows, we did use abbreviated quarantine last year as well. So the abbreviated quarantine already is in our plan. It's a little bit different this year because last year we had universal masking, and part of the recommendation with abbreviated quarantine is that students who come back to school early, either after 10 days with no symptoms or 7 days after 7 days with a negative test, they are supposed to be masked and maintain physical distancing for the duration of the 14 days. Now, the chance of a student developing COVID after the 10 days without a test or 7 days with a test is very small, but it still is there. But the abbreviated quarantine allows us to get our students back in the district, back learning sooner. The other piece to this, so in the plan, the board has approved a few situations where masks can be required. If you recall, singing, also specialized healthcare services like toileting, feeding, those kinds of things. This would be another one that we would suggest that if we're not going to have universal masking, that we do allow the requirement of masks to be agreed upon so that we can have students come back in abbreviated quarantine. The other piece to it is that the WIA is allowing for abbreviated quarantine this year, so we have made that change as well. So those changes are recommended, and then the other changes, I guess I would have a different person speak to.
The other change was something that I had asked to be added about eliminating the quarantines other than in-house quarantines. And this was something that actually talked to somebody from the school district in Slinger, very good friends of ours, that they had enacted in their district. And so what they had done is anybody that showed symptoms, COVID symptoms, positive, things of that nature, were automatically quarantined from the school. With the close contacts, they notified the parents and then allowed the parents to make the decisions on whether or not the student should be quarantined from school. Had surgery on Thursday, so I'm just gonna. Yeah. So that was why I offered that as a suggestion on this plan. I did reach out to the board president, Sling, today. I was not able to get with him to see how it's going, but they have a dashboard similar to Menomonie. They have, at this point, I believe it was around 20-some COVID cases in the district, maybe 30, but exclusions were next to nothing other than the COVID cases. So I know this is not what the medical professional recommend and in the areas recommend. I guess one question that I would have of Dr. Zadowski and those in the know is of the students that were quarantined last year or of the close contacts quarantined so far this year, what has been the infection rate or the COVID rate thus far? Last year, I don't know if we have the data from that or if we have any data from this year.
Sure, and I'll speak to the data the best I can, but I want to put out there right now that this is absolutely overwhelming. Our school district nurses, our director of student services, essentially worked all weekend, communicating with the health department. The number of exclusions is just, it's as we predicted. And to Abe's question, we're currently sitting at 40 cases in our school district since September 1st. And I just updated the dashboard a few minutes ago, because the numbers keep coming in. But anyway, we have 40 cases since September 1st. We're now at 1,086 student exclusions. And but what's even most concerning to me is that the number of exclusions is skyrocketing. They started out around 60. We did have a number of cases. There were 11 students that had COVID before school started on September 1st that had to isolate at the time. So those aren't even in our numbers. But we started out with, I think it was around 60 or so students that were excluded for either isolating for COVID or being in a close contact with a family situation. That quickly grew, and then on Friday of last week, we were at 180 students that were excluded on Friday, and now today we're up to 295. So we're seeing the number of exclusions continue to grow rapidly. Again, we're over 1,000, so I have no doubt that we'll be past our estimates if something doesn't change. But something does need to change. This is not sustainable. We are going to be to the point where there's going to be more students out of school than in school. And if that's the case, then we have to look at closing schools and closing classrooms. So when we look at what our options are, we're really talking about three things. You can talk about, universal masking, which, there's been a lot of discussion about that already. We can talk about eliminating quarantine, and we can also talk about distancing. In the board's packet, we shared with you a plan of what it would take to get distancing across the district. It's enormous. We're up to around 3,300 students again, which is over 500 students more than last year. So last year we were able to pull it off, but this year I really don't think that that's a reasonable option. It'd be well over $1 million, and that's if we could find teachers, if we could find staff members, if we could find aides. We have a number of hourly positions open right now that we have not been able to fill. We've been trying to find contact tracers. We can't find that. We are looking for a number of paraprofessionals to assist with some of the needs in our school district. We haven't been able to find that. So I'm not confident that even if the board was to commit over $1 million to try to get the distancing, I don't even know that we could hire it. And it certainly would take 2 or 3 weeks at the minimum. It would also require students to have to change classroom teachers, which certainly would not be a popular thing for parents and students and detrimental to the relationships that have been built. But to Dave's question, the most updated number, which I don't believe it includes the numbers from today, but at least 176 of the students who have been excluded so far were excluded based on attendance in school. That number at that time was about 60%. So I would say if you projected that forward, about 60% may continue to be the trend. But again, that doesn't include the most recent numbers. Out of the 176 students, we think there's probably less than a handful that have actually contracted COVID. Whether or not that COVID was contracted based on exposure in school, I think is a very difficult stretch to make, especially when you see so many people out and about. But we do know that there are at least 3 students that tested positive after being excluded from school. I guess the last thing I'd like to say is that I feel like there's a lot of pressure on the school district in all of this, but when you look at what's happening in the community, we have a number of students, and I don't know all of them, I don't look at the list or anything, but I hear from my kids and from other families who's excluded and who's not. I know for a fact that we have students that are not allowed to come to school that are still participating in all sorts of activities in the community. You see them in church, you see them at restaurants, you see them playing in recreational programs that are outside the district. So while we play an important role in this, I think a lot of pressure is being put in the school district when really our community is also making choices that have a big impact on this. But no matter what the community is doing, what I know is that we do, and I thought Mr. Wilkinson had a couple good points in his comments. We do have a responsibility to try to provide a safe and healthy atmosphere for our kids. We do have families that are choosing to do everything that they can to try to protect themselves and protect their kids. And it's pretty heartbreaking. I had 2 emails today from parents who had to go pick up their first graders at River Heights, and those first graders were wearing masks. They're trying to do the right thing. But the way the rules are, even if they're wearing a mask, if they're within 3 feet of someone who's not, actually if they're within 6 feet of someone who's not, for more than 15 minutes, and that person develops symptoms of COVID and tests positive, even the people wearing masks are going to be out. So without universal masking, the system is doomed to fail. It's not fair to our teachers, it's not fair to our kids or our families, and certainly it's not fair to our school nurses and our administrative team. So something has to change. I don't know what the board wants to do about it. I know what I would do about it, but something needs to change.
Any discussion from the board?
I have a question.
Angie?
To Dave's question, just to elaborate a little bit more, I know that I've asked you in the past, do we have data from last year from the health department in regards to what percent of our excluded students then tested positive after they were excluded? Because the example that you gave now, out of 176 students that were excluded, 3 tested positive, which is 1.7%. So we're excluding kids from being in the school and having an education for 3 kids that then tested positive. Following, and do we know, are those 3 students that tested positive, were they in a home with a family member that also had COVID, or were they just a random positive exposure, tested positive from?
We don't have data from last year specific, but I can tell you that it was very small. And like this year, it is small. The number of students that actually developed COVID on quarantine from the school is not high. But I can also tell you a couple things. One, it's too early to take anything from the data in our schools. We've only been open since September 1st. A high number of our quarantines have happened in the last 4 days of school. We did have the weekend in there, but with the 14 days, we don't know who is or who is not going to develop COVID. But I would anticipate it would still be relatively small. I do think it will be higher than this year or than last year. If you take a look at Dr. Horvath's message that came in this afternoon, what we know about the Delta variants, there's no doubt that it's more contagious. There's more doubt that it spreads easier this year. And then when you take away the mitigations like the masks, we're bound to have more cases. But I don't want to fear monger. I think I heard that term tonight. We're not suggesting that even 50% of our kids are necessarily going to develop COVID. But what we do know is that if we don't exclude, the number of cases we have are going to be higher. The more cases we have in our schools, the more cases we have potentially with our staff, with families, etc.
So of all the data last year, KT did not provide any data as far as what the percent exclusions were?
No, I don't have a percentage of exactly how many. Dr. Horvath might have a comment. Yeah, why don't you come to the microphone? There might be a mute button on top of it, Dr. Horvath.
Click on top of the thing. On top of the.
There you go.
Perfect. So I don't have a perfect answer to your question, Angie. I did some research on this afternoon, and I found a couple of points that I think were maybe relevant. Number one, in household contacts, the best data that I could find said that the transmission was somewhere in the 18 to 20% range. We don't have good data for schools, but that was for household contacts. What I could find is that in schools, the transmission rate is roughly proportional to the community transmission rate, which is high in our community right now. Lastly, Delta throws all of that out the window. Delta hasn't been studied, and we just simply don't know. So the best data we have is old data that may or may not be relevant to today's experience.
So to my question, are you familiar with any school districts that have data from last year, last semester, the entire year, of their percentage of excluded students that came down with a positive COVID test?
I could not find any data that's been publicly reported.
Any other questions? I guess one of the things that I keep going back to, and I do not feel that there's support in this community for mask mandate. It's been that way for quite a while. And I think that we know that there's COVID around, but when we looked at the exclusions last year, just the discussions that I had with Dr. Sadowski, it seemed a very low level of transmission for the exclusions, kids that were quarantined that actually got COVID. And my feeling was that there are some districts, one that I mentioned is Slinger, one of the board members actually sits on the health department. Their board voted 7-0 to approve that program. And not that I want to copy other districts, but I feel that it's interesting to me how different school districts in different areas of the state are looking at and going about it differently. And the one thing that bothers me is something that Dr. Sadowski alluded to a little bit, is that in school we're asked to do everything, to do full masking, to have the distancing requirements, to do the close contacts. But the minute these kids step out the door, it's wide open. And we've seen it from the celebration in Menomonie with the kids this weekend, the festival thing that was held. I don't care what store you go into or things like that. It's, the community isn't there as far as what they're doing now. So how do we say that, or how do we justify that the school has to be the enforcer on everything, when in the community we're not getting that same thing? One of the questions that I have for Dr. Sadowski is, the health department has advised us or recommended that. What is, from a legal standpoint, they haven't actually already said you have to quarantine or you have to exclude your students. Is that correct?
At this point, we have not received a written legal order. It's been made very clear that that will be coming in the event that the district doesn't follow the recommendation, but we have not seen any legal written order ordering us to quarantine students.
Tanya?
Just so that I just have to ask the question. So we're being told 14 day quarantine, even though WIA is also giving us, we are going to have to say no to that and have to follow the 14 days.
Are you talking about if we get a legal order?
Yeah.
if we get a legal order, the board would need to decide whether or not to follow it. Should the board not follow it, there could be additional liabilities or legal liabilities to deal with.
So as of now, is KT telling us that we have to not follow what WIA is suggesting and that the 14 days should be what we should be doing? Sorry if I'm not asking my question.
Right. I believe that KT Gallagher, the health department director here in Menomonie, I believe that her preference would be that students do not participate in athletics during abbreviated quarantine. She also did not think students should participate in athletics, period, last year, and the board chose to move forward using the WIA guidelines as the guidelines to follow. Essentially, that's what we've also done this year with abbreviated quarantine.
Any other questions or discussion on the board, from the board?
I have one more thing.
Angie?
I was looking for some data in regard to influenza deaths in 2019-2020. The CDC listed 199 influenza deaths. Then there was an article in time.com that listed 100 children deaths in COVID in 2020. Can someone explain to me why we didn't believe in masks during influenza and now we do? I mean, these are diseases of life. We will have them for the rest of our life. They will follow us along. We can't prove really anywhere that someone contracts influenza. They could get it in a bathroom, they could get it at a grocery store, they could get it at a gas pump. You can't particularly say that someone got it here or there. So, with that in mind, masking, from all of the studies that I read, an N95 is the highest rated mask that you can wear. And I don't see anyone in this audience wearing an N95. Do you have one on? And so if you really are concerned about protecting yourself and being safe, you should be wearing an N95. In addition to that, whoever mentioned that we are prohibiting masks, that we have a mask prohibition in this district, we do not. It's optional. You are welcome to wear a mask, and if you have an immune disorder, you should probably wear an N95 to be safe. I just don't see the data. There's not enough data provided here to convince me that we should, move in a different direction. I am more apt to make a motion to support Dave's quarantine of close family members and have it optional otherwise, and leave it up to the parents. I think kids should be in school, and it should be a parent decision. If a child is not symptomatic and not sick, they should be in school learning.
Just for clarification, Angie, is that a motion on the COVID Action 19 plan as presented?
No, because there's two different. Did I read that right? There's two different.
The only other thing in there is the abbreviated quarantine. So.
No, I would support that motion. I would like to make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Just a clarifying question. Could you please clarify what it is that we're making a motion on right now? Just clearly and specifically.
Go ahead.
So Chris, the motion Angie just made is to approve the plan as presented, which includes the abbreviated quarantine language that is recommended, and it also includes the change to the district's quarantine procedures.
Could you explain exactly what the changes are for district quarantine? David mentioned what it was, but we'd like to hear specifically what that change is.
Sure, if you open up the document, you can see it in yellow, but to summarize it, it's available publicly as well. But to summarize it, what it means is that the school district would still contact trace, notify close contacts, but only household close contacts would be required to quarantine and be excluded from school. The other quarantines would be at the family's option.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? not sure if Mark, if you can hear as well. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Recipient second.
I did say I would second, yeah.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Carl?
Yeah, so were you going to share, this is a question, were you going to share Charlie's correspondence with us that showed up in the minutes for the agenda, like mid-meeting? So that's the question.
You want me to summarize it, Dave?
Joe summarized it.
Yeah, Charlie Schneider was not able to be here tonight, but I do know that he's in a remote location, but he was able to get a message off. And do you want me just to read it? It says, "Dear fellow board members, although I can't be in attendance for tonight's meeting, I would like to quickly share my views on the proposed change to our current procedure for exclusions in the district. In short, and to be bluntly put, this is a terrible idea that could not only put our students and staff at risk, but also have potential to put our district at risk financially. I know the burden that the current policy has to put on the district as a whole, but to be honest, did anyone really not expect this after masks were made optional? If we pass this, the board will have ignored the advice of multiple levels of people whose job it is to advise us of risks. Yes, our job as the board is to represent the electorate of the district, but part of that is protecting the district from liabilities that everyone in the community may not be aware of, such as legal liabilities. We all know the best way to keep exclusions down, and this isn't it. Please think about this before you vote tonight. I'm sorry I can't be there. Respectfully, Charlie Schneider."
Thanks, Carl. Thank you, Joe. Any other discussion on the motion as presented? Yes, sorry.
Just have a request, would you also like to summarize the legal counsel that we got on this direction?
So Chris, just to make sure I heard you right, you want me to summarize the legal advice? To summarize it, I would say that legally, we have not received a written order to require quarantine. So if the board votes to do this, the board has not necessarily directly violated any health department order at this point. However, there are concerns, not only about a potential order not coming, but also liability concerns, with not following the recommendations of, again, CDC, DHS, local health department, school administration, district medical advisor. So there are concerns about potential liability.
Chris?
Would you then suggest that legal advice was that this would put us in an increasingly jeopardizing situation with
Yes.
That's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, compared to doing what we're doing, yes, I would say not. Following the advice does put us in more legal liability exposure potentially. At the same time, under current situations, I'm not certain that we do have a written order that would have to be followed. But I am not recommending or advising this action.
Other questions or comments from the board members?
I'll take a little bit. Some of the concerns I've been hearing from parents is, obviously we're not keeping up with the current contact tracing. We've got an issue. I had 2 families reach out to me last Friday that had received notice from the school district that their kid would not be able to attend school. In one case, the contact tracing was from September 1st, the first day of school. The other one was September 2nd. Last Friday was September 10th. They received notice that their kid could not return to school until in one case Wednesday and the other was Thursday. This is a problem. Why are we even bothering contact tracing if the person's in school for 5 days or 7 days before we're able to even quarantine? So obviously something's not working. And then the other big thing I've been hearing.
Clint, would you mind if I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll give you a
I agree with you. I think and it was a failure last year as well. The county contact tracing, our school nurse, and I want to make it very clear, our school nurses, our director of student services, our principals, our teachers, they are doing a marvelous job. But oftentimes we do not get the report of a positive case until well beyond that student has already been in school. And that just makes my blood boil. Because I agree, those parents that get a call and say, oh, your student was potentially exposed 4 days ago, and yet all the things that that parent let that child do during that time, it's an absolute failure. It's a mess. Something needs to change.
One, kind of to piggyback off that, I know it was asked, I think David Snyder asked, how many of the exclusions turned into positive cases. If it was completely ethical, I'd actually like to know how many of the students that were in those classrooms where the kids were supposedly should have been quarantined, but we couldn't keep up with, how many of their fellow students tested positive during that time? I'd just like to know. And then the other question, or the other thing that's been brought up, it seems as though we've thrown a lot of our, at least the impression is with the community, is that we've thrown a lot of our other mitigation strategies out the window, and we believe in masks only, and that's the answer to all of our problems. But I know for a fact, my kids have come home, and I've heard from numerous families in this community that feel like we're not doing anything as far as sanitizing, cleaning desks, spacing people out adequately. So could you address some of those concerns as well?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Clint. I agree with you. I don't think we're doing what we could. I tried to share vaccine information this summer and was basically told to stop doing that by members of the board. Also with the masking piece, after the last meeting, I put a message out and said that masks are strongly encouraged. I was told not to do that. And you heard from our students tonight, we're probably less than 10% across the district of people choosing to wear masks voluntarily. Our teachers, they have, and there was a question about that tonight during the public comment, we have provided them with a mechanism for how to communicate with their families and with their children if they would like to request that they consider wearing a mask. They're very careful how they do that, but they do not have the authority to require it. So we have tread really lightly based on direction that we've received and criticisms we've received. But I do think there's more we can do with that. Now with the cleaning, that is something that we've emphasized. Our Director of Building Grounds, Kevin Tomaszewski, he'll be able to give his Building Grounds report in a little bit. He's done a great job making sure that every single classroom has cleaning supplies, also has hand sanitation station in each and every single classroom. Teachers, even though they're not required to disinfect desks after every single class period, the desks are disinfected by the evening custodians, and then also the teachers disinfect them anytime there's a logical break in your classroom. So if the students go to a special period like music or Hvac or whatever, then the teachers are disinfecting the desks. In the high school, middle school, if they have a prep period where their classroom is empty for a period, again, they disinfect the desks. But we have custodians wiping down everything that can be wiped down. They're doing a great job with it. And then in terms of distancing, we just don't have the room. Again, we have some classrooms that have 22, 23 students, and our teachers, they're doing a good job spacing them out. But the plan the board approved and the direction the board gave us was that we needed to guarantee 3 feet. And if there's additional space, we will allow for teachers to have collaboration tables and some things like that that are really important for the academic programming. So in some classrooms, perhaps we could have got 4. If they get 6, they have to get 6. But if they can't get 6, then that space between 3 and 6, we have a little flexibility on because those kids are get excluded anyway, and we want to prioritize the educational system.
Amy.
My question is the cleaning. I understand that, but it's an airborne disease. It doesn't live from, maybe Dr. Horvath can answer this, but it doesn't live on surfaces as long as it is in the air.
So it's actually primarily a droplet form with some components, I guess. It's primarily a droplet-based disease with some airborne activity. You are absolutely correct that fomite transmission, that's the medical word for bugs living on surfaces, is relatively low in this disease. Hand washing is the hand surfaces, finger surfaces are the one exception to that because we touch our fingers directly to our mouths and our nose and our eyes where that transmission occurs. So we know that no mitigation strategy in and of itself is perfect. We also know that a layered strategy of hand washing, barrier protection such as mask wearing, vaccination for those who are eligible for it, and appropriate distancing do better when layered together. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Dr. Horvath.
And in terms of the hand washing, not only do we have the hand washing available, but our teachers, especially at the younger ages, are doing a great job with students. The first week of school, I always visit every single school. And it was perfect timing. I was over in Oakland and I actually watched a first grade teacher giving a lesson to her children on how to properly wash their hands. So I know that our teachers, especially at the younger levels, are doing a good job with that before any kind of eating. Those kinds of things. We also work on respiratory etiquette, how to handle a cough and sneeze. You'd be surprised at how many people don't know how to do that. But I guess one more question. Do any board members, do you understand contact tracing? Do you have any questions about how that works?
Maybe Joe just run through a quick scenario of what it might look like.
And Tony, I know you were doing a lot of it this weekend, so feel free to jump in. But essentially, we get notified of a positive case from the county health department. And sometimes we actually are notified by family prior to getting notified by the health department, but not always. So once we find that out, then our school nurses or our director of student services, or if we could ever hire contact tracers, they then start a line list. And essentially what a line list is you take the student and you find out when they were in our building, when they were contagious. So if they had a test, you go back 48 hours from a positive test, and if they were in the district during that 48 hours, that's the time they potentially could have exposed people. And it also depends on when they first began to be symptomatic. That's another challenge we're finding with the Delta variant is that sometimes students might have sniffles, they might have what is typically considered allergies, and it gets worse and worse and worse, or someone else in the family gets it, and then they get tested. Well, then they test the student, and the student tests positive, and then when they talk to the student, they say, well, what, you had any symptoms? They say, well, yeah, I had a running nose for the last week. Well, then you go back to when those symptoms started, and that's part of the problem with that delayed 2 clinic, is that a lot of these kids, they do have very minor symptoms. So then you find out, oh, that actually was September 2nd when they were in, September 2nd that they were in the school. So then you find out, okay, who are they sitting next to? Well, that part's pretty easy because we have the seating charts, and then you have to cross-check the attendance to see, were those kids actually there that day. So you create your line list, then you go through and figure out, okay, are they old enough to be vaccinated? Okay, so the kids that they were in contact with, were those kids fully vaccinated? Because if they're fully vaccinated, they don't need to quarantine unless they have symptoms. Then, once they figure all that out, now they get to start contacting families. And if you have ever tried to call parents when a student's in trouble or a student's sick, sometimes it goes real easy. Sometimes it's call, email, call, it's not easy. So it's very time consuming. Our school nurses have a lot of other things they're also trying to balance. It's a mess. That's contact tracing for one case. And we have 40 cases so far since September 1st. 1,086 exclusions, 1,086 phone calls, 1,086 letters, 1,086 times the principals, 40 times the principals email all the parents and say, hey, there was a case in your school today. It's ridiculous.
Look, Dr. Horvath, there was comments earlier about comparison of last year to this year, and can you comment about the care we should take when comparing 2 variants that are behaving completely differently?
Yeah, thank you, Carl, for that question. And the answer is we can't. As I mentioned earlier, there are a number of things that we know. COVID is a real thing. We know that a layered protection strategy works better than any individual strategy by itself. We know that transmission in schools is generally proportional to transmission in the communities. We know that kids generally don't get as sick as those of us who are adults. But we also know that Delta is a whole new world, and Delta has not been studied. So all of the experience we have with the previous year may or may not hold. We just simply don't know. As someone asked earlier, it's like trying to compare influenza to rhinovirus to SARS-CoV-19. There are some commonalities for sure, but there are many, many, many differences as well.
Is the data still leaning towards the R0 being at least double the original COVID?
That's what I've been seeing, that's correct.
Meaning, can you explain that?
Thank you. So the R0 is a measure of transmissibility. So R0 of 1 means if I get ill, I pass the disease to one other person, R0 of two other people, et cetera, et cetera. Forgive me, I don't have my references in front of me, but my recollection is that diseases like roseola, the R0s are in the 10 range. Influenza is in the 2 to 3 range. Coronavirus is in the 2 to 3 range. The Delta virus is probably pushing 4.
Dave, if I could add one more thing. First of all, I got a little carried away there on the phone calls. I'm sorry. Obviously, it was not 1,000 phone calls because a lot of the times those kids are gone for multiple days, so it's one phone call. It's not per student. It's not 1,000. Probably half that or something. I also wanted to point out that we continue to collaborate with other school districts. River Falls is a pretty good example. They have a similar enrollment that we do, and they are requiring universal masking. Their cases are very similar to ours. I think that's where some of the concern comes from, is that I do think people wonder whether or not masking is really going to have a big effect. And that's why I do understand the proposal on the table. But what I can also tell you is that River Falls has had hardly any exclusions. And that's because they do have the masks on. So whether or not the masks work, again, I'm not a doctor. I do think there's value with universal masking, but I'm not sure how much. But what I can tell you is the rules of the game are simple with the CDC. And if the masks were on, our exclusions would be next to nothing in terms of school-based exclusions.
I guess from my standpoint, that's why I'm lobbying for this, because I think that when I looked at school districts of similar size to Menomonie, the COVID cases were fairly close. It's just the exclusions is different. And in Menomonie, we have to do something different than what we're doing right now. The status quo is not acceptable. So either we go at it from the exclusion end, or else we have to go at it from the mask end or something different. And I don't feel that there's support for the mask portion of that. We've been down that road 3 times already. And that's why, from my standpoint, I feel that we have to address it from the exclusion side. And that's where I stand.
So Dave, at what point with the cases then, so let's say that we are pretty similar to River Falls right now with the cases. And if we were to get rid of the exclusions, and a week from now, 2 weeks from now, all of a sudden we see that our cases are outpacing River Falls by a certain amount. I mean, is it, at what point does the board look at doing something with masks?
Well, I think we've been in a fluid situation for a year and a half now with this COVID stuff, and I think we continue to look at it every single day. And I think if we get to the point where all of a sudden we did pass this tonight, we come back 2 weeks later and it looks like Menomonie's COVID rate is ticking up in our schools, and we factually know that something we're doing is wrong and causing that, then I think it's something that the board has to look at. So either from an exclusion standpoint or from a mask standpoint. Any other discussion? Clint first,
Yeah.
Chris, sorry.
Dave, it's actually interesting that uses River Falls as an example. I did some research this afternoon, and statistically, River Falls is identical to us on percentage of positive cases with full universal masking, which is pretty interesting. I'll read kind of their procedure right now for their exclusions, because I did look at this, and student employee has a potential exposure to COVID at school or on a bus. An advisory email is sent to the family from the school district. The school district will not notify or not require mandatory quarantine. Second bullet point, families have the option to select one of the following. And the first choice is monitor symptoms for 14 days, no quarantine unless child is experiencing COVID symptoms. Second choice is follow the Pierce County Public Health Recommendation Protocol, which states under here, quarantine is optional. Students are not required to produce a negative test to return to school and just simply monitor for symptoms. So that is how River Falls is handling it. I think it's a good case study to kind of watch the two districts because we're running completely optional or strongly recommended, and they're running universal masking with the same numbers as we have right now.
I can't believe you have that. That's pretty cool. What's the chance of that?
There's some of your districts too.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Chris?
I'm still on the clarifying question or discussion. A lot of the discussion here is interesting, but it's kind of extraneous to what the motion is on the table. I know we're going to rehash whether or not people think that masking works or not. That's not what we're talking about right now. So I have another clarifying question for you. I know that you didn't give any commentary on whether or not you thought that a legal order by KT was going to be imminent, but what did the legal counsel, what was the legal counsel's perception on whether or not KT would likely or not likely create a legal order that then we would then have to deal with regarding? The question was, or the question before the council was, if we follow this recommendation by David and we no longer have a quarantine period, would KT likely then make a legal order? And he gave a very specific instruction on that regarding his perception of our official.
I think she will, and I think if she does, I think our liability goes up.
I had a second clarifying question. This would be for Dr. Horvath. I know that people are asking questions about whether or not it's necessary or a good protocol in the midst of a pandemic to quarantine close contacts. Could you make that very plain for people that even if there is a low positivity rate among students who are quarantined, that keeping those 3 to 5 students out is compounded over time if we don't?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I just want to give a brief digression here, if you'll allow me some latitude. Quarantine is a well-established public health procedure that's been around since the plague. We quarantine people who have been exposed to diseases but do not yet show symptoms in order to prevent that spread. That ends up being an exponential growth kind of pattern. We isolate people who are sick. We quarantine people who are not sick. So to answer your question, my last comment, we've thrown a lot of numbers, a lot of data around tonight and in previous discussions. In my years of training and experience, I've learned a very important lesson, and that's healthcare is hard. Healthcare is complex. Healthcare is not straightforward. And there are certainly things that we can try to protocolize, but each case is unique. My recommendation is to leverage the expertise that we have in our public health officials and allow them to evaluate each case in its uniqueness, and that we then follow those directions, follow those instructions, follow those recommendations that are given.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Chris?
Okay, thanks. Now I've got some commentary. And this is similar to the last meeting we had, where we had a motion on the table that had conflicting parts to it. So I'll try to ask some clarification about what exactly we were voting on, because it appears that we've got the first half of the motion is to approve having masking required for students to come back from early quarantine for 7 days. I'm sorry?
It currently is, isn't it?
And the second part of the motion is by David that we end quarantine. Is that correct?
Except for family, in family.
Well, those are two conflicting, one negates the other. and it's irrational. It happened the last time we had a meeting as well. So could I offer a friendly amendment? And if it's okay with Angie, who made the motion, and Mark, who seconded the motion, if we could separate both of these issues and vote on Davis first, which would negate this second part of the first part of the recommendation?
I don't think it negates it, because if someone is on a quarantine because they're in quarantine because they have a family member and they don't get COVID symptoms within 8 days, they can then come back wearing a mask for the following 4 days. And that's currently what our policy is, isn't it?
Yeah, there would still be quarantine for the household members, so the abbreviated quarantine would still be appropriate.
Can I ask a question? Would there not be a difference between, Dr. Hvac said, in the hospital we talk about isolation because you're sick versus quarantine because you've been exposed. We here are using quarantine pretty much universally for both scenarios, correct? So if someone is at home because they tested positive, that's a different situation, is it not, than a close contact quarantine in the policy?
Yeah, in the plan, it still requires students who tested positive to isolate.
Okay.
It's really all about exclusions for our plan.
Chris had asked about offering a friendly amendment.
To separate the parts of the amendment to the COVID plan.
To break it into two pieces, those two pieces, I guess I'd defer to Angie first, if she wants to.
I have one more thing I wanted to add, if I could. I had seen some data and I looked a bunch and was not able to verify, but Thomas School District had kept data, maintained data last year. And if this is correct, they had 651 quarantine cases, and less than 1% of those actually contracted COVID. And so when you look at that, and you look at our 176 that are excluded right now, and only 3 of them so far have contracted COVID, that's 1.7%. So 98.3% of our kids are home now with no symptoms. And what kind of a legal liability do we have not allowing them to get an education when the data is showing so low numbers of kids contracting COVID?
We have zero legal liability if we exclude kids. We have a legal right, and some people would argue an obligation to exclude them.
So even though the data is showing that they're not contracting COVID at a higher rate.
I agree, it's not showing that, but that's still what the recommendation is.
Okay, just to get back on track, Angie, yes or no on Chris's friendly amendment?
I'm not going to support it, no.
Okay. So we have a no, Chris, on your friendly amendment.
Can I use one of my actual statements? I think everything so far has been worded like Jeopardy, so I got you.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Just very quickly, you can't make assumptions that only a certain percent of kids are positive who've been quarantined, because not all those kids have been tested. You would need to test every kid on quarantine right now to have data that says what you just said is said. That's just statistics. You know, this is an issue of risk tolerance, and I want to acknowledge that. Like, I'm not here to say I'm right, everybody's wrong. We have a huge breadth of folks in the community who are perceiving the risk of this illness differently, and that's just what it is. I have my experiences, Dr. Hvac has his, you guys all have yours. I'm a little concerned that right now we're so focused on being right or beating the other part of the argument. There's really no discussion going on of a collaboration. All of a sudden it's the school versus the public health department, right? Craig mentioned how we have to have things in our society to do them. We have to work together. When I go to a fire, we have to be working with the police that are there, right? We can't be left and right hand not knowing what's going on. So I'm very frustrated by that lack of collaboration. I'm not blaming anyone on any end of that, but we should be able to work together when bad things happen or challenging things happen. We are absolutely at a different place. At the July 26th board meeting, the county COVID activity rate was 60 per 100,000. The most recent data, and it's not updated because I'm sure KT's overwhelmed, was 574 per 100,000. So it's nearly, 9 times the rate of spread when we started trying to agree on a plan of how to handle this. So things have absolutely changed. We can do hard things. I would like to see us work together better to find something in the middle that's between nothing with controlling respiratory spread and quarantine. Cases absolutely do go logarithmically. One case turns into 8. Those 8 turns into 64. We can't control what's outside the school building, but we as a board do have to have the ability and courage to control what goes on in the school building. It's stressful, but we can do hard things. I've said it before, and I don't think it will sway anybody's mind. I spend all day talking to hospitals in rural America. That's what I do for a living. One of the hospitals that I talked to 2 weeks ago in Idaho is right now providing what's called crisis standards of care. And that means that they are not liable due to a whole range of things that have to be done when there's not enough stuff to go around. And I am concerned that our region is headed that direction. I see nothing yet that says we're not. I can't tell the future, and I hope to God it's not. But those are the things that weigh on me when I go to bed at night and think about these things. The people who are going through things right now that we not have had to yet. And so I would just say that I am concerned about the liability as well with this decision, as Charlie pointed out.
Thank you, Carla. Other board members? Mark, I haven't checked in with you lately. Anything that you want to add?
No, I don't have anything, other than the fact that you, a little bit of Joe, and Tanya are the only ones that I can really hear. The audio is horrible. So I'm sitting here listening to mumbling on my end from everybody. I just can't pick out the words, so it's hard to hear what's going on, and it's super frustrating.
Sorry about that, Mark. Any other board members' discussion? Chris?
Okay, I'll try and speak more loudly, Mark. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so if we can just keep score of how the argumentation has been going. We've got legal counsel that recommends against this because it puts this in increasing legal jeopardy. And the legal counsel's expert opinion is likely that KT is going to make legal mandate in terms of what's going on with quarantining. We've had our medical advisor come forward that says that quarantining is an effective measure and strategy for stopping the spread of COVID, and that small numbers turn into very large numbers very quickly. I've heard from Dave that clearly the non-masking policy is not working, and so he's trying to find a solution for that. But there's been no positive understanding of the way in which that going without quarantining or taking it off the table is going to protect our students, which is the #1 priority we have as a board. So understanding like that kind of critical analysis is important for what we have to do on a board. And so if there are any other positive understandings of why we think that Dave's amendment is going to work, we would like to hear what those things are now.
I don't know if you're speaking to me or not, Chris. I used up my 2 times already. So. Any other discussion from the board? Okay, no further discussion. Let's vote on the motion that's been brought before us. Janet?
Dave, do you want to clarify?
Okay, yeah, to clarify this motion, thank you, Glenn. So what we're voting on is the COVID-19 plan update that's in our board docs as presented with both the addition to the 7-day quarantine policy, right, Joe? Abbreviated quarantine policy, and my addition of the close contact exclusions, only including family close contacts. And after that, it would be up to the family, so.
May I ask one question? Sorry.
Yes.
Clarifying question. Is it correct that even if this passes, the burden of contact tracing itself will not change on the school nurses because, right, parents still will be notified that their child was exposed, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So we will still be doing the contact tracing. They will have to notify the families. The families will have the option of excluding their kids from school. So the motion is before us. Did you get them, you able to hear that okay, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. So Jan sent out the query for the vote.
It just kicked me off again.
Oh, hang on. I got it.
Try refreshing, Mark, or?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Jan, do you have everybody else that says? You have the option, Mark, of waiting for that or doing a voice vote.
It should be coming up in 20 seconds, sorry. Otherwise, I'll slow voice.
I think you might as well.
I can do that. You want my vote?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the motion carried 5-3. The yes votes were David Steyer, Clint Moses, Tommy Hughley, Mark Hillman, and Andy Skillings. The no votes were Amy Earl Swanson, Chris Freeman, and Carl Pullman. Thank you. Next action item is action item 4B, action to approve updates to the Sdma staffing plan. Dr. Sadowski. Oh, sorry. Motion to approve. Motion to approve.
Yeah, so
Carl? Angie seconds. We have a motion and a second. Thank you, Dr. Horvath. Appreciate it.
So as the board knows, we still will need 2 contact tracers because we're still going to contact trace. So this is just officially having those positions ratified. Hopefully we can fill them. And then we do need 1 additional early childhood special education teacher based on enrollment and increased numbers.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, let's vote. Let me know if you don't get it, Mark, okay?
Will do.
Mine came and I voted already, just so you know.
Hopefully I'm not through, I got it.
Okay, motion carries by unanimous vote 8-0. Action item 4C, action to approve the 2021-2022 substitute teacher incentive plan. Motion to approve. Angie, is there a second? Tanya?
Okay, due to the interest of time, I'll just give a brief summary. If there's questions, Sam can come up and answer them. But essentially, we spent about $300,000 last year on additional subbing with full-time subs. We feel a better way to increase our sub pool this year because more people are willing to come into the building now. is to structure a bonus and incentive program. This program will be less than half as expensive as last year, so we're looking at $110,000. There's a lot of details in there about, if you sub a certain number of days, you qualify for a certain bonus. I guess at this point, I think it's a must-need and must-have. But if there's any questions, Sam can answer them. Otherwise, the board can move forward. We'd appreciate your support.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions from the board? Discussion? Amy?
Is this going to help?
We sure hope it will, and we sure think it will, yes.
Okay.
If not, we'll be back to you with more plans.
Okay, because I've seen a lot of places that are doing incentives even higher than that, and they're still not able to get the substitute teachers, so I just wanted to make sure they were doing enough.
I think it's very creative, so I commend Sam.
She did a great job.
Yeah.
You got free lunch, what more do you want?
Free lunch.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Janet, let's vote. Okay, Mark, our vote just came through for us. Ooh. Did you get it, Amy?
Amy, did you get yours?
No, sorry.
You?
Okay, motion passes by unanimous vote, 8-0. Okay, that concludes our action agenda. We'll move on to discussion items. We have several on the agenda for tonight. We'll start off with our summer school report.
So first of all, I'd like to introduce the board members to our director, John Sam. John is the director of academic supports. So not only is he working on summer school, but he's also working on our virtual school program, and he's responsible for the part of the strategic plan when it comes to increasing community activities, and what I need to say is the after-school program for our kids. So John, welcome, thank you, and take it away with summer school, please.
Thank you, I appreciate the time tonight. I just have a few slides, obviously the PowerPoint's in there, but I just want to touch briefly on a couple of them. Quickly to review what summer school looks like. It was great to have kids back in the building in the summer. They had I started in the middle of it, and it came in, there's a lot of energy right away, so that was really cool to see. The kids had a good time. Summer school consists of Summer Academy, which was 19 days of enrichment and remedial programming. 3 week long. So I should back up, academies are only 4 days a week from Monday through Thursday. The summer camps, art camp, team camp, and STEAM camp, Monday through Friday, so that was the full week. We do collaborate with the Boys and Girls Club for wraparound care afterwards. We also have some summer athletic camps. We also have the school meet and greet day, that's the most recent things we had. And then we collaborate with UW South and CTC. So look at a few numbers. Oops.
You can just verbalize it.
All right, so at summer camp, so at summer camps, we had 363 students who attended our 3 different camps. During the high school academy, we had 761 students enrolled that participated in the academy, and at River Heights, we had 237 students enrolled. Through UW South, we had 22 students participated in the STEAM experience. That was middle school and high school level. And through CBTC, we also had 71 students enrolled in one of the 12 CBTC Academy courses this summer. Part of summer is credit recovery for those who might not have had a chance to obtain those credits. Had some really good turnout there. We had 131 high school students who recovered, a total of 152 half credits. So we did a good job of getting some credit back during the summer. We also have time in the summer for students to work ahead. This frees up some space in their schedule for other opportunities. We had 99 completed courses between health, civics, PE, and professional financial management. So another good opportunity there for our students.
Quick question, how many did the health this year? Any idea?
I don't have the number right offhand of the specifics, sorry. One thing,
My son did that a couple years ago. It was a tough course.
I think it was still a tough course, but we did have quite a few finish that.
Brian, you don't know off the top of your head, do you, how many students did health summer school?
No, not off the top of I probably do.
Okay, we'll come back to it.
Okay, I just wanted to touch on the new course that we did have. We had an environmental art course that was very well received by the students. The students spent time out at the environmental site, so they spent their day out there participating in art projects as they took on hikes and just kind of had a good time in nature for the day. And then lastly, I want to thank both our transportation. They did an awesome job of making sure kids got to school safely, got home safely. They were on time. It was very, very, very well done. It was, they were on time, if not a little bit before every day. As well as our food and nutrition. They did an awesome job of providing breakfast and lunch for any student that wanted that every day. Actually, throughout the whole summer, they provided over 30,000 breakfasts and 30,000 lunches to students that would come to the school if they wanted food. So they did a tremendous job as well.
Sam, did you find it?
25.
So 25 students took the health course over summer school. That's great.
Thank you.
That was really quick, but any questions?
Yeah. Any questions for John?
Thank you.
I want Amy.
I just want to say thank you for that report. I really like it. The pictures are really glorious.
Thank you.
Very delightful.
It was fun.
Yeah. So very nice report. Thank you.
On behalf of the board, we want to welcome you to Menomonie as well.
Thank you very much.
We're excited for what the future holds for your position.
I too appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Well, Kevin's coming up. I do want to point out the summer school. It is really a team effort, and I can't say enough about Brian and what he's done in curriculum instruction. His assistant, Carla Klingfish, she does an amazing job tracking so much of this with the registration and all the reporting that has to be done. Sam with the hiring of summer school, and we know that was a big challenge, and we appreciate the board's support with the summer school incentives that we did. Those were very effective. And then all the other directors, Leah with the budget, and then the principals, they provide some additional supervision support. And then certainly we can't talk about summer school without our great staff. So thank you to everyone who made it such a success.
At this time, we'll call on Kevin Tomaszewski for building and grounds report.
All right, thank you. So I supplied you guys with several pages of bullet points kind of outlining the projects. I'll go over some of the highlights. We won't have to talk about all of them. Starting right out though, not to beat COVID to death, but I think probably the biggest thing that the BG department worked through over the from last September to this September was COVID. Is that better?
Yeah. Well,
okay. Our custodial staff spent a lot more time this year cleaning, rearranging classrooms, all that good stuff, and our maintenance staff put a lot of miles on hauling equipment, supplies, etc. between schools, storage. So they did a really good job navigating this and keeping up with the regular duties. In this list of projects, some of them are stars, so those are 30-year plan projects. I'll just talk about all of those in a group here real quick. Parking lots, we did 2 parking lots this year, Oakland and Wakanda, are both resealed and painted. Sidewalk repairs, we made a certain amount of repairs at 4 schools this year, Oakland Middle School, Napper Heights. We're still working on designing a new fire system for Oakland Elementary. Hope to move forward with that next summer. And we resurfaced all 10 of our tennis courts at the high school this year as well. Also at the high school, we already talked about the weight room, but it was one of our biggest projects. New floor, ceiling, walls, equipment, LEDs, the whole deal turned out looking pretty nice. Moving over to the middle school, we have an asphalt track over there that was getting pretty tough to see the lines. We totally resealed and repainted all the lines on that track. Turned out really nice. Lots of compliments on that job. Also at the middle school, one of the 4 schools, I believe, that have the old heavy accordion style gym dividers. We took that out, put in a drop down curtain like you might see here at the high school. Project went well. River Heights. My favorite probably project of the last year, we took out 135 feet of curb and installed transitional curb. We had nowhere to push the snow in River Heights. If anybody's ever tried to plow over a curb, it's hard on equipment. There's nowhere to go. We left snow in the parking lot. So really hoping we see a big improvement this winter. Up at the district office, we made room for 2 of our new employees, our energy manager and director of academic support, if I got that title right. We transferred the office room into 2 offices. Energy and HVAC related topics. You guys have all met Justin, who's been doing a great job in that field. Some of the highlights from this year. Done a really nice job doing a complete inventory of our equipment. How old are our boilers? When were they installed? What size are they? What are the serial numbers? We're tracking everything that we can think of tracking, just to make our lives a little bit easier. We've replaced VFDs, we've upgraded JACEs, weather stripping in windows. A very detailed energy tracking database has been developed by Justin. We have 7 years of data in that we can at any time compare, last month to this July to July 2 years ago. Really nice job all the way around. Our fleet, the district has 15 vehicles. This year we traded in 1 plow truck. It was a tough year to find trucks, but it was a good year to trade trucks, and we were able to make that work. We traded in a 2017 3/4 ton with about 80,000 miles. We got 26.5 for it, which was a pretty good deal. So we now have a brand new truck, new lift gate, new plow mounts. So overall, our fleet is strong. I think our next trade-in is also going to be I'm not being biased here, but also be a maintenance truck. We have one older one, it's a 14, but probably 70,000 miles right now, so we'll keep an eye on that one. But what I do every year in January is go through all the fleet and just report mileage condition, that kind of thing. Grounds equipment consists of several things. Probably the highlight is our toolkit. We've accumulated several attachments for it over the last several years, and it's really good help with maintenance stuff. Moving forward, our snow sweepers, I would classify them as more of a homeowner, heavy homeowner style equipment. They're aging, so we're going to have to look to upgrade them and go a little bit more commercial with those. We have 3 of them, high school, middle school, and River Heights, that we use strictly for snow. As far as any kind of contracts in my department, the only update over this past year was our HVAC PMs. We stayed with our current contractor. Even though it's a PM contract, there's a lot of information in it, a lot of things that get looked at. So Justin and I worked with our account manager with the contractor to develop a sheet where we can kind of enter in live what's been done so far to date. So that's something that we're working on getting off the ground. Purchases, salt spreader for a toolcat, and then we stocked up on turf supplies, grass fertilizers, field paint, plumbing, electrical, all those types of things that we'll use for the coming year. Then I just put a section in there for you guys to see what our staffing consists of. Happy to say that we are with the staff right now, so knock on wood.
Tanya?
Super small. That in front of the middle school, they extended everything really nice. And I know at one time we talked about perhaps like a step sign that was coming down on the bike trail, because otherwise like the kiddos both ways just zip across the traffic. Is that a you, Kevin, or is that somebody else I should?
Yeah, that's something we talked with the city about. They were going to install them. I know
Okay.
that project just recently wrapped up, and
Sure.
I didn't think to check on that, but I can do that.
Okay, awesome.
Either way, we can get that in.
Other questions?
Yeah. First off, fantastic as usual. I'm always impressed with how you run your department. Just a question about the air handling, and so we got this great HVAC. I know I talked to Joe about COVID airflow and how basically all of our air handlers and things are kind of turned up to max, right? And we're running the highest MERV filters probably that we can without burning out the furnace motors, right?
Exactly.
So is there any classrooms, especially in that K through 6th grade, where we're not masking that kind of stuff, where it makes sense that there's less air turnover than other classrooms, depending on the building, we can't open windows in most of our buildings for airflow. Is there any selected rooms where we should be considering HEPA filter portable in a room based on airflow? Maybe if you can't answer now, that's fine, but it's something I would be curious to know in the future, because it's a non-invasive strategy for the kids to maintain, prevention of spread.
I would have to go back to my notes, and that is something that we explored. If I recall correctly, across the district, we were able to adjust those airflows with the exception of some select areas, which, if I recall correctly, were the district office and some portions of the high school.
So obviously I'd be most concerned about classroom spaces. Thank you.
I'm worried about you, Joe.
Very thorough as always. I did notice you mentioned that you were able to stock up on some extra supplies. Was that because there was extra money in the budget to use, or is that pre-planning kind of ahead?
That was some year-end, end of the fiscal year purchasing.
Okay, thank you. Extra money.
Good job budgeting is what it was.
Yes, good answer.
I just have a question about supplies, materials, that kind of stuff. Have you seen the crunch? Because a lot of time, at least from what we see, there's things happening as far as inventory and things like that. Has it affected you guys at all, or you sitting pretty good now?
I think we're mostly over the shortages of, some of the custodial supplies. Using that old line fighter panel upgrade, one of the reasons we didn't pursue doing that this summer was they didn't feel we'd be able to get everything we needed. There's such a delay on some of the electrical parts. So it is still out there, vehicles obviously, things like that.
Other questions? Chris?
Kind of wanted to follow up on Carl's question to you. And I don't remember having a discussion about HEPA filters before, but since we ostensibly have no enforceable mitigation measures for COVID-19 in this semester, those were about $2,000 a pop. Do we have any information on efficaciousness of the filters working as additional measure to help keep kids safe in the classroom? If we can't do the easy, cheap fixes, this might be something we could all agree on as a reasonable way to actually keep kids safe if it doesn't correspond to CDC guidelines or health department protocols.
I don't have any specific information. I can certainly get it. I think there would be a large number, and at that price it would get quite high quickly. But if it's something the board would like me to put together, I certainly will explore it.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate your report. At this time, we'll have our program resources reviews. Brian.
All right, well, good evening, and thank you. So this is an annual update. One thing that I included in the background was some information on an updated timeline for review of Wisconsin academic standards. The reason that is included is that is one piece of information that we use to help inform the updates to the timelines for our program reviews. Academic standards that we use in the district are something the board takes a look at every July. But then when we get into our academic program reviews, one of the things we take a look at is not only how our students are performing academically, but what type of access they have to programs and instructional opportunities. But then our staff also take a look at whether or not the content standards that they're using are updated and current, and they go through the process of updating curriculum maps and things of that nature. So because the DPI this spring and into the summer updated or released an updated review period for academic standards, we did take a look at our previous program review timeline and created some updates to that. We had planned to review English language arts and math during the last academic year. the last school year, we put many many non-essential committee meetings on hold, so that caused us to carry this program review into this school year. And as such, we have updated and gone through and adjusted this timeline, so it's a good opportunity to do that. Also, as in prior years, one of the things that we will be doing at the conclusion of the ELA and math program review that we're conducting this school year is we will be bringing the recommendations and the updates and outcomes of that review to the board as part of an informational report and for you to hear those updates. As far as kind of looking out to the future, you'll see that we are at a point now where we are starting to circle back for many of our program reviews, starting the second go around with some of these since we came out with this structure. There was a period of time where we did not have a set program review plan in place, and you'll see that starting in the 23-24 school year, that'll be the second review cycle will be starting for programs since we have gotten onto this time frame. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions that the board has, more informational as far as when the dates are and things like that.
Questions for Brian?
Yep, just a quick question, Brian, on the old, because I keep everything.
Yeah.
On the old one, we had human growth and development.
Yep.
And then it also looked like ELA we had as a category. Are those just in these someplace?
Yeah, so ELA would be charts. So that an acronym or abbreviation for there. And then human growth and development is actually one that we are rolling into our health program review when we do that. We had that separated because we actually, when we looked at our human growth and development curriculum, and the last time that any updates had been done to that, it had been many, many years since that had been reviewed. So, but we will roll that into the health process moving forward.
Joe? Oh, okay. Any other questions for Brian? Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Okay, at this time, we'll go on to item 5D, process and timeline for the 2022 medical insurance renewal.
In the interest of time, I'd just like to point out that this is a very similar timeline that we've used with success the last several years. I appreciate Leah putting it together. We already are working through this timeline, so unless there's any questions the board has for either Leah or myself, it's really just an informational item. Any questions?
I see one. Okay, we'll move on to item 5E, review of district banking extension.
And I would say that this is along those same lines. The board has had an opportunity to review Leah's recommendation, the work she's done with that. We do plan to bring this back for board approval at the next meeting. But are there any questions tonight for Leah?
No questions? Okay, we've tabled policy review until our next meeting. Item 5G, review items related to next meeting dates, etc. We have our next special board meeting coming up September 27th at 5:30 p.m. I will say, we made the decision to move this tonight to the auditorium based on crowd size. If the indications are that we're going to have a big crowd, we'll continue to have it here, but if we think the crowd will be smaller, we will have the meeting back at the administrative center. So appreciate everybody coming tonight. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. I missed who? Carl? Good. Carl, set motion. Chris, second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We stand adjourned. Thanks, Mark.